This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, and here we go, kickoff. Yes, so welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to the first UK Veeam user group virtual event of 2023. It's been a long time since we had one of these. We'll just quickly chat in there, 2021 or 2020, sorry, just post-COVID. So it's good to get back into the swing of things, just easier and gently with a virtual event for the time being. And yeah, we've got a couple of good community sessions today to break you in and get you through the day, set you up for lunchtime. So, start with the slides. So, just to give you a quick introduction, my name is Craig Dalrymple. I'm one of the Veeam user group leaders. On the call today, we've also got Ian Sanderson. He's one of the leaders. You want to say hello, Ian?
Hello.
Hello. That's it. The user group's been going since 2015. We had our very first event back up in Edinburgh. We piggybacked on the back of one of the Veeam live events in the afternoon, and back then I think we had five attendees. Since then we've been to Manchester, a couple in London, and then just the one virtual event. This is our only second virtual event, so yeah, we're going to try and get back into the swing of things and work our way back up to an in-person event. So before we get started, as Maddie said on the call, this event will be recorded. The recording will be then available on Veeam YouTube official channel. So if you're okay with that, all good, we'll carry on. And the agenda for today is, we've got today's introduction, which we're on at the moment. These are not hard and fast times. They're just, give you a rough idea of what we're aiming to end at 12:30, just in time for lunch. So we've got the introduction, then we've got a great community session with Michael Paul coming up, but sure backup. Stay around for that because that is a good one. We're going to give you a small community user group update later on as well. Then Ian's going to do a little talk about Microsoft 365 API changes, very interesting. And then we're going to try something a bit different. What we want to try and do is get you engaged more as the attendee. We want to hear what you like about V12. If you've got V12 was released a couple of weeks ago, some of you may have had it in the labs or maybe put it into production now. We want to hear what you like, even equally as much, what you don't like so far. This isn't restricted to just Veeam backup and application version 12. Let's talk about all the new products. We've got Veeam 1, we've got AWS, we've got lots of different new versions of products to discuss. Let's hear you. So let's try and make that session as interactive as possible. And then at around about 12 noon, we'll have a quiz, for 20-minute quiz. Quiz is basically an online, I'll show you later on, there's a little setup we need to do ahead of time. 10 questions, multiple choice and timed, so you have to be correct and you have to be fastest to get the most points. We have 8 questions already decided and written up. The last 2 questions are going to be composed throughout these sessions. So pay attention, don't just drop off and keep your coffee topped up, don't just have it running in the background. Pay attention because some of the questions in the quiz will be based on some of the live discussions and sessions we have throughout the day. So it pays to hang around. And then we'll try and wrap up with a final Q&A, little chat, if anybody has any questions from out the day, and then hoping to wrap up around 12:30, just in time for lunch. So before we go any further, that's the wrong window, but anyway, excuse that. First rule of Veeam User Group, please talk about Veeam User Group. We've got a community site over on community.veeam.com. Strongly encourage you to head over there and register and join the conversation. I don't know why that's in there, that's a weird one. But anyway, Veeam User Group it's about end user involvement. So we need you as the attendees to engage with us. You only get out of these what you put in. It's about dialogue. Let's get the chat going. Let's hear what you've got to say. Let's hear your thoughts and ideas. It's about the community, about you, about us. Coming together in the community, and it's all about knowledge sharing. What it is not, we'll go back on. It is not a free-for-all for resellers, consultants to promote their own business. We won't have sessions where people come on and try and sell you their product. What we will do from time to time is have vendors on the call. Sponsorship, we would need that as part of this. But we'll have vendors come on the call and we will have the vendors talking about how their technology or their product integrates with Veeam, rather than standing there and saying, please buy X, Y, and Z. So this is all about end user involvement. It's all about using Veeam technologies with Veeam or Veeam technologies through in innovative ways and experience. It's all about knowledge sharing, so that's what we really want to push. So housekeeping too, like I say, there's a prize. There's a quiz, sorry, with 3 prizes generously donated by Veeam themselves. So £100 Amazon vouchers, £75 and £50 Amazon vouchers. We're going to run it as a multiple choice, timed questions. You can either do 1 or 2 things. You can either install it on your app. So there's the links there, the QR codes there for either the App Store or the Google Play. Or if you don't want to put a new app on your phones or your devices, head over to the website down here, kahoot.it. And then from there later in the day, we'll give you the game code to come in and join and play the game. But decent prizes, so stick around. And like I said, 2 of the questions are being written live throughout the sessions today. So pay attention to what's being said and some of the information that you're being given today. And I think that's about it. I think we're getting ready to start the first session, which is Michael. We're going to hand over presenter mode to Michael. Michael's going to get his slides set up, and we're going to have a really good talk. Just while Michael's setting that up, just to ask in general, who is aware of Sure Backup? Who knows how it really should be set up, and who's using it in anger? And again, well, this session is really for these people. At the end of the session, I guarantee you're going to have at least 1 or 2 great tips or pieces of advice to take away regarding Sure Backup. So I will hand it over to Michael.
Okay, so if I can just confirm that everyone can see my screen. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. So today's session is going to be diving into Sure Backup, aka what I wish I knew about Sure Backup when I was getting started. So let's start. Who am I? Why should you have the slightest interest in what I've got to say? So my name is Michael Paul, data protection consultant from the UK, and crucially, I've been working with Veeam for over a decade now. Veeam certified architect, and I hold certifications with a fair few of the technologies that Veeam works with, namely, VMware and Microsoft Worlds. Hopefully that's enough to convince you to stick around for the session. And I'm joined today by Craig. So Craig, I know we've already heard from you, but if you want to reintroduce yourself.
Yep, so in my day job, apart from a Veeam user group leader, I'm an inside solutions architect at 1111 Systems. So in the past, I have dabbled with Sure Backup, setting it up with things like Sure Replica and stuff like that. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what Michael's got to say from his experience and see if I can share any of my tips or experience with you all.
Perfect. And finally, you can see our socials on the screen there if you want to connect on Twitter or Mastodon, or if you've got any questions after this session, you'll find us over on the Veeam Community Hub as well. So with that underway, let's get started. So the agenda for today, we've got a few topics to kind of go through, and whilst I'll try to go at a pace for you to take notes, this session is going to be recorded and we'll do some Q&A at the end if we get time. We're going to be assuming no prior experience with Sure Backup or Sure Replica, but experience with Veeam Backup and Replication and either Hyper-V or vSphere. So firstly, we're going to talk about the multiple components that collectively define a Sure Backup job. We'll discuss networking concepts that make Sure Backup possible. We'll go through some lessons learned from the field, those common stumbling blocks, and what's new in V12. And then finally, we'll do a live walkthrough of it. So starting with the terminology. There are 3 types of verifications within the Sure family. So firstly, we've got our traditional Sure Backup. This is referencing the running of virtual machines from backup files. These could be your traditional VMware or Hyper-V virtual machines, but also with V12, you can run Windows and Linux agent-based backups too. Then in the VMware world, you can perform Sure Replica jobs, which refers to the running of virtual machines from the created replica VMs of a replication job. Just as a quick note as well, no, you can't use continuous data protection, otherwise known as CDP with this, or at least in V12 anyway. Finally, also within the VMware world, if you perform Sure snaps, these aren't the typical jobs, and we'll discuss these further later on, but in essence, we're using storage snapshots created by Veeam as our source VM data to restore from. I'll be referring to these collectively as Sure Backup jobs, and if I need to talk about anything specific to one of those, I'll call it out. So, what do I need to be able to use Sure Backup, aka requirements? So, starting with the planning phase here, what do I need to be able to use Sure Backup? Well, firstly, this is a license feature, so if you are using the Community Edition, you're out of luck. But you can still do your own manual testing via Instant Recovery, however. So you're going to need any of the Veeam Universal license options to leverage this, such as Foundation, Advanced, or Premium, doesn't matter. Or if you're using a traditional socket-based license for VMware or Hyper-V, you're going to be looking at Enterprise being the minimum level for these features. If you do want to leverage SureSnap, which is, as I mentioned, the verification of storage snapshots, you are going to be looking at the Enterprise Plus edition. That has no impact on the Sure Backup product, but we need Enterprise Plus to be able to leverage that storage snapshot integration. So secondly, if you're working with VMware, you'll require the vPower NFS service to be configured. As this is the way that Veeam presents backups to VMware for these recovery verification tests, then we're going to require some suitable infrastructure, namely compute, to run our testing on. This will be an ESXi or Hyper-V server. It could be dedicated or just with some spare CPU or memory headroom on your production environment to run additional virtual machines on. Your specific requirements will depend on how heavily you want to tax the servers, but we'll look at that a bit later. Next, we'll require some spare storage capacity. I'm deliberately ambiguous on this slide here because it's one of those kind of typical, almost consultant jokes of it depends. But fundamentally, it is going to depend on your platform. So in the Hyper-V world, you're going to require spare capacity on the Hyper-V host, whilst in the VMware world, you'll either need some spare capacity on your vPower NFS drive or in an ESXi data store. And we're going to explore this when it becomes relevant. And again, your capacity requirements are ultimately going to depend on how long you want to keep the virtual machines running for. Again, as we look through the Sure Backup platform, it's going to make sense. Finally, if we are planning on using SureSnap, then we need to make sure, one, that the SAN is actually supported by Veeam, but then also we need to make sure that if your SAN has any licenses to leverage any of the functionality that Veeam needs, then we need to make sure those licenses are there. Now, license features, that can be a bit of a complex topic there. So you'll see a QR code on the screen. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to Veeam's product feature comparison document. This isn't just for Sure Backup. This is for the entire, what I would refer to as Veeam Availability Suite, or now known as the Veeam Data Platform. So with that in mind, let's go on to the more exciting part, which components define a Sure Backup job. So what we've got are 3 different components that go into the creation of a Sure Backup job. And in my opinion, this is where most of the confusion around working with Sure Backup jobs actually comes from. First, you define a virtual lab. Then optionally, you can define an application group. And then finally, your backups or replicas that you want within your job. This does make sense from a logical perspective, but only after you know what on earth these things are. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this list and we're going to flip it on its head. You might be wondering why I'm doing this. Well, I consider this more of a story or a journey that we're going to go through. To best understand how to configure these things, we need to understand why we need them, so we can set them up in a way that helps us achieve our goals. So let's begin, and it will start to make sense. So we're going to start with the Sure Backup job. As I discussed in the terminology slide at the beginning, the purpose of a Sure Backup job is to run one or more servers from a backup. Why do we do this? To verify that our backups work. Taking a backup's the easy part. Ensuring it helps us when we need it, that's the tricky part. So now we have our core goal, prove our backups are recoverable. But what does this actually mean to us? Does it mean the operating system successfully booted? Well, sure, that's a necessary baseline for us. Without a functional operating system, we're not going to have any luck with our applications, are we? But this is the key point. Applications, data, services. No organizations operate on a fleet of empty operating systems. Instead, we need to go further. We need to ensure that the network stack is operational, so the servers we want are able to communicate with endpoints. And finally, those applications I mentioned, we need to be sure that they work as we need them to. So Veeam Sure Backup will help us with these requirements. Firstly, how do we meet this boot verification that I mentioned? Well, when we create a Sure Backup job, we add one or more backup or replica jobs to a section called link jobs. So first, what they link to, a virtual lab and possibly an application group. But we don't know, nor do we care what these things are yet. So we'll say no more on that. All we care about currently is the section of the Sure Backup job where we define these link jobs. So once we've added one or more backup jobs onto this, then we can choose to add all these different operating system tests that we might want to achieve. So, which is to recap, how do I know my operating system is booted? So in the screenshot here, you can see I've got a backup job called Exchange Backup. Now I can choose to validate things based on a per VM basis or on a per job basis, with per job helping us scale more. But let's kind of have a look at this. So when I choose the Exchange Backup job and then select Edit, let's see what we get. We get presented with 4 verification options tabs. For now, we're going to focus on the second one called Startup Options. The second section on here gives us a maximum allowed boot time. So this is the amount of time that a server is going to potentially take to boot before Veeam will start doing any testing. Now, provided that the server has either VMware tools installed and running and is on vSphere, or as Hyper-V integration services running on a Hyper-V host, Veeam can attempt to ping the network interface to detect the OS is booted. In the event that Veeam can't detect any IP addresses for the server, it will instead await a heartbeat signal from VMware tools or integration services as appropriate. Finally, if these services aren't running, that's when we'll just rely on this maximum allowed boot time. It's kind of our final threshold. You'll notice that we have options here to influence whether or not we care about the particular characteristics of our servers. If you have Windows Firewall blocking ping, well, you can tell Veeam not to worry about this, as we can see here just by disabling this option. Likewise, if we don't have the VMware tools or integration services configured, then, well, we're not going to get a heartbeat. So again, we can disable this functionality. Now, a nice new V12 mention here is that you can automatically disable Windows Firewall via a final tick box on the screen, and we'll discuss further in the common stumbling block section why we might want to do that. So just to recap where we are, we wanted the operating system to boot, and we wanted the network stack to be operational. We've just confirmed these via the checks we've carried out. With our heartbeat, we're making sure the OS is booted and those VMware tools or integration services have started. They won't start if the OS hasn't booted. And likewise, ping is enabling us to be aware of this, because again, if the network stack isn't operational, well, then that rules out our network services, but it also potentially says, well, without the OS, network stack's not going to work. So the final thing I want to draw our attention to on here at this point is application initialization timeout. Now, what on earth does this mean? Well, after the OS boots, your applications might need a minute or so longer to finish starting up before they're ready to be queried. And this is our safety net, because we don't want to rush too quickly and get failures just because we were impatient. But this still doesn't answer how we know our application's working. So to understand this, we're going to jump over to the role tab. You'll notice this screen looks rather straightforward, just some checkboxes. These are the roles that are built into Veeam Backup Replication. But what do? So we're going to select one such as mail server, and then we'll go to the test scripts section. So when we specify a role, this relates to there's an XML file stored on the Veeam Backup and Replication server. Most of the built-in ones use an executable called the Veeam Backup Connection Tester. You can pass it an argument such as the %VM_IP % that we see here, which means use the IP address of the verified VM, and then the port we want to test. So in this instance, the common port SMTP 25. These scripts can also influence recommendations for maximum boot timeouts, for example, that we mentioned earlier, but these are only suggestions and your settings will override the suggestions. So describing all the different XML options available in full would take up too much of the session, but the Veeam Help Center documentation has this available in great detail for you. So the QR code you can see on screen, if you scan that, that will take you straight into the Creating XML Files help page. A final comment I want to make on these test scripts is that they don't just need to be simple port tests. That wouldn't benefit us in quite a few use cases. Instead, what we can do is we can use, if we refer to the SQL Server role, it will connect to the SQL Server and ensure all the databases are reporting online and healthy, which brings us to the final tab. Credentials. To be able to run scripts on the system, instead of simply performing port tests, we need to specify credentials for our scripts to use to authenticate to the test VM. Now, remember that these scripts are executed from the Veeam Backup Replication server, These scripts won't exist locally on the test VM, so factor that into any code that you might write for your own use cases. So this brings us back to the purpose of your backup jobs. We can verify that the OS starts successfully, the network stack is operational, and our applications are functional. Well, that seems like everything we want to do, so surely we don't need a virtual lab or application groups. So I'm going to start to throw in another requirement into the mix. What if my host that I want to run my backups on can't actually run all the virtual machines at the same time? Now, this isn't an unrealistic scenario. If you consider testing your backups on a production server or trying to fit a whole cluster's worth of backups onto a single host, that host will be under a lot of pressure. Wouldn't it be nicer if we could run these servers in batches? Or what if we got a huge database, possibly for a CRM system on our production platform that needs to be sized with a large number of resources based on the production requirements, such as 128 gig of RAM. Now, if this is a test system, we're not going to be delivering that same amount of stress to it unless our scripts demand it. So the servers won't be under production loads. So to recap, we want to run only X number of servers at a time, and we might want to shrink the RAM allocation of these servers. So let's explore this, and we might just see where application groups fit into the picture. So let's start with the amount of memory we need to allocate again, as we specify this on a per VM basis. So those
Michael,
huge
Michael, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my screen's just taking over your screen. I don't know what's happened there. Hang on.
Fair enough. Okay.
Apologies there. I don't know what's going on.
No worries. All right, let's share my screen again. Okay, am I back in the driving seat?
That's okay. Yeah, there we go. So apologies for that. I don't know what happened.
Yep, looks good.
My mouse is just taking a life of its own now. Apologies, Michael. Carry on.
No worries. Okay, so just to kind of summarize where we were, we've just added a couple of constraints into the mix. We only want to run a certain number of servers at a time, and we might want to shrink the RAM allocation for some of our big heavy-duty production servers. So if we have a look back at the verification options here, you'll see that first of all, we've got this option amount of memory to allocate to the VM. So again, these huge SQL servers can be squeezed down to a much smaller percentage of their original RAM allocation. And this would certainly help us with fitting more VMs concurrently. And as we can see here, this is the first option on screen. Now, what about running virtual machines concurrently? You'll see on this main link job screen that we've got the option to limit the number of virtual machines we run simultaneously. This helps us avoid inputting excess pressure on any production systems that are also testing our backups. And we can just start up the virtual machines, test them, and shut them down without exceeding our process simultaneously limit we've set. But you might notice a problem here. When we're authenticating, as we mentioned for some of these tests, we need to authenticate against something. Now, some scripts might be able to authenticate against a server locally, but for the most part, you have an Active Directory that you need to authenticate against. Now, certainly if we have an Active Directory, we're going to need to recover this when needed. So we've met our constraints, but we've introduced a new problem here. Wouldn't it be nice if our AD server could stay up all the time as opposed to bringing it up, testing it, and shutting it down? That's going to break our credential script testing, surely. So this is where we add the application group. So what's the purpose of an application group? It's to provide required dependencies for our servers. These are virtual machines that we will spin up and keep online for the entire duration of offshore backup testing. So what could this mean to us? This could mean, as we previously mentioned, an Active Directory being accessible. This could be a core database being operational. This could even just be something as simple as a DNS server being resolvable. So it doesn't matter if our application group and offshore backups are even in the same jobs. We could have a replica providing our Active Directory server, but we could have a backup providing the other servers we want to test against. It's very flexible in this way. So now I want to draw attention to the roles again, kind of focusing on AD. Eagle-eye viewers might have noticed that domain controller was on here twice. And this is because you can restore the domain controller in an authoritative restore or a non-authoritative restore. And we don't need to go too deep into Active Directory to understand what this means for us. Our goal is to ensure Active Directory is accessible. It might not always be possible to know which domain controller will be backed up last, and therefore have the most relevant data and be the one that we want to add into our application group. We can influence this, however, by specifying to our server in the application group to restore in an authoritative restore mode. What we're doing by specifying this is telling it to override the other servers in the domain with the information it has available, in essence. Likewise, by telling our other domain controllers, potentially just ones within our normal short backup job, to boot in a non-authoritative restore, we're supporting this authoritative claim. What we're doing is we're saying, your data is invalid. Instead, accept being overwritten by the authoritative server. As this is a temporary backup test, this is suitable for us. As long as we have our server configured with authoritative restore in the application group, the server will run the entire time of the backup test and authentication against the domain should be successful. So to recap, we don't need to be limited to a single server within an application group. We can have as many as we need. We even have the option to keep these servers running at the end of the sure backup test if we want to perform any manual verifications on top of this. Now's the time to panic, because let's wait a minute, this sounds really dangerous. Why on earth would I be letting a backup solution interfere with my domain controllers? Couldn't this damage things in production? Well, sure, it could, if we were working in your production workload. Enter the virtual lab. What does the virtual lab allow us to do? Well, it creates a safe space for our test servers to run on. It's a safe environment for all the test servers to reside without fear of impacting production. Now, again, let's look at our requirements. We need to isolate our backup tests from production, but still be able to run validation scripts against the test servers. These are the roles that we were just talking about, or your own custom ones you might want to create with XML, and potentially even allow some port forwarding into this isolated space for us to take a peek from the outside. Potentially, if we needed to run an older copy of data for auditors to see as an example. So how do we achieve this? First, let's take a look at how devices normally communicated before virtualization. So here we have a stack of servers, a switch, and an endpoint. In the world before virtualization, we connected our servers to switches and switches to endpoints, configured some IP addresses, maybe some VLANs or separate switches, and away we went. Then things changed with virtualization. One of the key drivers for virtualization was to do more with less, increasing efficiency of resource utilization. We sought to share physical resources between multiple servers. Now, most people think about CPU consolidation, RAM consolidation, potentially even storage consolidation, but it also benefited networking. It isn't common practice to have one network port per virtual machine. So to control our network topologies, we had to move from relying on network segmentation with cabling and VLANs or separate physical switches, and we needed to introduce virtual switches to handle this logically. We still cable our servers physically to the same switches as we did before, but we have a software layer controlling the packets that permitted out of which network cards and on what VLANs. And this is how Virtual Labs achieves the isolation we need for our backup testing. A virtual switch does not actually require any physical connectivity to the outside world. If we don't provide any physical connectivity, then virtual machines can only communicate if they're on the same host and on that same virtual switch. So what is our virtual lab really? Well, primarily it's comprised of a proxy appliance, and that's not too different from any of your favorite firewalls in its purest sense. It has at least two networks, one in our LAN virtual switch and one in our Shore backup virtual switch that has no external connectivity available. If we consider running a domain controller in our LAN and a backup to test in our isolated network, there isn't any production impact, as the production domain controller and production endpoints could only communicate on the isolated network if we give it a way to be able to. Now you notice I called the virtual lab a firewall, and what do firewalls do? They allow controlled access between networks, and this is the same with our virtual lab. I'm going to put a pin in this subject for now, and we'll return to it when we talk about network concepts shortly, as there's more to a virtual lab than just this proxy appliance. When we create a virtual lab, other than usual bits of information required, such as name, description, we have to specify a host, and this is where we'll be creating our virtual proxy appliance, running our resources, for example. And if we're using vSphere, then by default, Veeam will automatically create a designated resource pool for you and a VM folder within your topology. This can be handy, making sure that you can easily locate, run and test virtual machines within your vSphere environment, as well as providing any overall resource consumption constraints on the resource pool. Now, a feature that's only available in vSphere is we can choose to redirect the write cache for our virtual machines that we're testing. I was alluding to this earlier when I mentioned we'll need sufficient space for our backup testing. Let's take a step back and understand what this means for us. So when I run a virtual machine in vSphere, I read data from a data store. This concept doesn't change in Sure Backup, apart from for backup specifically, we read from the vPower NFS service that I mentioned earlier. This allows Veeam to take the virtual machine files from a backup and present them within an NFS data store for the ESXi servers, automatically configuring the host to use this share. Veeam will then take our backup and decompress the data on the fly, presenting it for the ESXi host to read. This saves us from having to copy all of the backup data onto production and saves us on storage capacity needed on our ESXi host. However, even on boot, virtual machines are also generating write traffic to storage, updating event logs, for example. This data needs to be stored somewhere temporarily, as the virtual machine might need to read that block again. So we've got two options here. We could write the data back to the location specified by the vPower NFS service. It is an NFS data store at the end of the day. Or we could redirect these writes to another pre-existing VMware data store. Now, why might we want to do this? Well, simply because most backup infrastructures, they're designed to focus on longer term retention. The storage is typically designed for capacity instead of speed, in contrast to production storage, which would typically contain faster storage tiers. The end result of this is an accelerated amount of I/O being delivered to the virtual machines and a better backup verification experience versus reading and writing to vPower NFS. This could in turn enable us to test more virtual machines in parallel, speeding up your Sure Backup testing. With that cleared away, we now have the information we need to choose if redirecting write cache is necessary for us, and if so, we choose our data store and we move on. We now arrive at one of the most important screens in the virtual lab configuration, using the proxy appliance. If we untick this box, then we can only boot up the virtual machines and perform a heartbeat test. Every other piece of verification functionality we discussed in the Sure Backup job and application group section relies upon the proxy existing. So we need this enabled 99% of the time. We can edit the settings to specify the name we want to give to the virtual machine, which data store it should sit on, which, fun fact, by default, it will try to place it on your largest data store, which might not always be the best home for it. We need to specify the production network we want to communicate with the proxy appliance on, and then whether we want it to use DHCP or static IP address configuration within this network. And finally, should we want our test virtual machines to be able to access any external resources on HTTP or HTTPS, we can allow the proxy appliance to also act as a proxy, as an internet proxy for our virtual machines. This is handy if you've got any applications that might require phoning home to a licensing server before starting, as an example. Now, we've ventured into a lot of configuration for a virtual lab, and I just want us to reflect on the purpose of virtual labs again for a moment. We need to remember our goals. We need to isolate our backup test from production, and we've just discussed and looked at how we can separate our test virtual network from our production network to achieve this. We've briefly touched on how the proxy appliance acts as a firewall, so we should be able to expect to achieve things such as port forwarding and allowing communication through from one network to another. At a very, very high level, we understand how a virtual lab is going to help us achieve our goals. But there's more to discover here to ensure that we get the maximum return on our time investment. So to explain these points in further detail, we need to start looking into some networking concepts that virtual labs relies on. And then later when we get to the demo, we'll wrap up the last few pieces of information. So what networking concepts do virtual labs rely on? So taking a break from the virtual lab installation screen, talking about these virtual concepts, the first one we need to talk about is IP masquerading. If you've ever configured a home internet router or a firewall, you'll likely have heard of NAT, or network address translation. This in its simplest form is the process of converting an IP address into another one. But whereas on home routers, this is typically used to share one public IP address from the internet provider with multiple devices, we have a different goal here within our virtual lab. So consider our Veeam backup and replication server. We start a backup test and we need to talk to the isolated domain controller. Well, it's very easy to say, sure, it should be able to communicate, but in reality, if our Veeam backup and replication server is sat on a production network, as is a production domain controller, and our production domain controller and isolated domain controller have the same IP address, well, how does it know where to actually send that traffic? It's not going to send this traffic to the isolated domain controller. Instead, it's going to reach our switch, and then it's going to look at its destination, 10.0.0.1, and it's going to deliver it to production, which renders the whole purpose of isolated testing pointless. Instead, what we'll do is we'll create a new range of IP addresses, allocating a block of IP addresses the same size as the production network, and inform the Veeam backup and replication server that they're accessible via the proxy appliance. So, well, can I just remind people to jump on mute, please? I don't know if anyone else is hearing that background noise. Thank you. So with that out of the way, let's see this in some further detail. So let's keep our existing production network here of 10.0.0.0/24 with our domain controller being 10.0.0.1, our Veeam backup and replication server being 10.0.0.2, our proxy appliance with 10.0.0.3. Now, what the Veeam backup and replication server can do is we can create an IP masquerade network, which again, to bring this back, is the same as network address translation. What we're going to do is we're going to address our packet to the isolated domain controller as 10.100.0.1 as my test example. And then what will happen in this case is when we send the packet to our switch, it's not going to go to our production domain controller. It's going to go to our proxy appliance instead. And when that happens, what we're going to do is we're going to perform our network address translation, or our IP masquerading. And we're going to convert this from 10.100.0.1 to 10.0.0.1 at the proxy appliance. And at this point, we send the traffic on to the isolated domain controller. This doesn't impact anything else we've done. We can configure as many IP addresses as we need for networks to reside in. This isn't limited to just one virtual network. So this brings us to the next point. Well, how did the Veeam server know to send it to the proxy appliance instead of the production network? Where did that come from? So the next thing we're going to talk about is route tables. So all Windows servers and endpoints have something called a route table built into them. This is a list of all the networks the computer is aware of and how to get there. If you've ever wondered what a default gateway is when you're configuring one, this is your default route, or the route you take when you don't have anything more specific within your route table. If we look at the screenshot here, we can see that the VBR server can communicate with anything in the 10.0.0, making sure I got the right amount of O's there, 10.0.0.0 network. Anything else that's not on link will go to its gateway. So what's going to happen instead is to enable us to route to this 10.100.0.0 network that I randomly threw into the air in our last slide, is when we configure this within our virtual lab and then we run our short backup job, Veeam is going to add a route into our route table for this network, and it's going to crucially say to address it to the proxy appliance. And this is how we bypass all this need for configuring a default gateway. And then once the test is finished and the virtual lab is shut down, the root's automatically removed again by Veeam, which we can see here is now tidied up to how it was before. I'd also like to add at this point that, again, this isn't limited to a single virtual network. If you've got multiple subnets across multiple virtual networks, then Veeam will just add additional routes as you configure them within your virtual lab. So the final networking concept really that I want to talk about is static IP mapping. So it was something that we alluded to earlier, and you might at this point rightly be thinking, well, we configured an IP address to our proxy appliance. So why do we need to worry about static IP mapping? Surely we do port forwarding. Well, no, we could do, but it would actually restrict us in a lot of ways. Consider this scenario. I've got two iOS web servers, and web servers typically will have either a HTTP port such as 80 or a HTTPS port such as 443. So if I had one proxy appliance IP address configured, well, then I would need to do all kinds of port translation rules to try and hit traffic internally. Not all applications might support that. It might break a few workflows. Instead, what we can do is we can assign additional access IP addresses to the proxy appliance. These will just be additional IP addresses within the subnet that the proxy appliance resides in within our production, but these will have a one-to-one IP address mapping. So in this scenario here, what's going to happen is I've got my proxy appliance configured as 10.0.0.200. It's got two additional access IPs ending 201 and 202, and these have isolated IPs of .1 and .2 respectively. So from my production endpoint here, I say, okay, I want to talk to 10, that should be 10.0.0.201. Silly me not checking my homework. But it's going to send that over to the proxy appliance. It's then going to convert that from 201 to 101. And when it does that, it will then send that traffic onto the IIS server. Likewise, if we addressed anything to end in 202, it would instead send that traffic to 202 for us. You can even do other things such as, because we've got these static IP mappings configured, you could create a DNS record, such as if you wanted to have a development SQL instance as, say, def-SQL.contoso.local, something like that would be absolutely fine to configure. And as long as your virtual lab was running with your short backup job or your application group, then you would be able to reach that. So now, let's go on to our common stumbling blocks here. These are just a collection of notes from the field that are the typical barriers I see people hitting when they first start trying to play with short backup. So, starting with Windows Firewall, love it or hate it, this has been built into every Windows OS for nearly 2 decades now, or longer if you count its predecessor. And doing what Firewall does best can cause us a lot of issues when performing testing, such as ping tests or running scripts against our servers. This could be for multiple reasons. Potentially your server only accepts connections on the ports that we're trying to test from specific IP addresses, or maybe you allow connections on the domain profile only and not on the public profile. Whatever configurations you use here, they were more likely than not designed with no regard for short backup in mind. You could reconfigure your firewall rules to include these considerations for short backup, but some organizations might not like this due to having testing rules in your production. Otherwise, and a great new addition to V12 is the ability to disable Windows Firewall automatically, and we saw that earlier. You'll notice as well that I mentioned some profiles only. This ties into a common issue that I've seen whereby domain controllers get booted in authoritative restore, but then it doesn't believe that it's attached to the domain network as a result. What will then happen is it applies its public firewall profile, and then these rules can prevent other servers from communicating to the domain controller successfully, and therefore we might see some failures in testing because it can't authenticate, or even further, it might find themselves misconfiguring their firewall profiles to public because it's not successfully authenticated against the domain controller, cascading the problem even further. So you might find as well that your servers fail heartbeat tests by not detecting VMware tools, or potentially you have another service that fails to start. There's a perfectly good reason as to why this happens. Now, when we're running backup tests, we're running them not from production storage, we're running them from our backups. And that's being decompressed and effectively rehydrated on the fly, presented over NFS to the ESXi server. But again, it's not from production storage either. So we have this cascading element of these little bottlenecks that can add up to a noticeably reduced IO throughput. That's without even mentioning that when we run our virtual machines, the first thing Veeam does before it boots them is it takes a snapshot so it can chuck those redo logs somewhere. We looked at this earlier with vPower NFS and, do we redirect the right cache, etc. But all these extra IO bottlenecks can cause services to take longer to boot. VMware Tools is notorious for not being the fastest service to start. So I've seen it quite often that it takes longer than the 30 seconds that Windows by default will allow services to start within. And then it fails to start, which then causes us to not be able to heartbeat test, and again, can have the knock-on impact of us failing our testing. Now, one of the things you can do here, if you are finding this bottleneck, is there's a registry key that you can create called services pipe timeout. And it's on the screen there for you, but effectively you go to the HKey local machine, system, current control set, control. We add our new D word services pipe timeout, and we can set a value, this is in milliseconds, up to a maximum of 120,000 or 2 minutes. This isn't documented by Microsoft anywhere, but if you try to go even 1 millisecond above this, then it will just completely ignore what value you put in there. So, one of the other things that I find is Windows updates violating maximum boot times. So quite often, we've got our backup jobs testing running and it's all looking great. And then what happens is your policy might decide, okay, I've downloaded the updates, I've installed them, but I've not done an automatic reboot. That's going to get caught in another patching schedule. I have seen it whereby Windows will then attempt to, on boot, install any pending Windows updates. Now, this wastes a huge amount of IO because this is a backup test. And there's no point our backup test installing the Windows update, unless that's specifically what you were trying to test, and then rebooting and coming back up. So this can violate the maximum boot time. If you've got, a much slower RAID array, for example, maybe it's just, a RAID 5 without, say, a decent cache there or something, I have seen this take, over 10, 20 minutes, especially if you've got multiple servers booting at the same time and they're all in the same situation. They're all trying to boot. Sorry, I've just seen the message there, but yeah, they're all trying to boot at the same time. They're all trying to install updates. It's generating a huge amount of IO. Now, one of the other things to talk about is there's actually built-in troubleshooting mode within the Sure Backup sessions because it might not be clear at the beginning what we're trying to do and where we're going wrong. So what you can do is if you find your Sure Backup test fails, whether it's the application group or whether it's the Sure Backup VM itself, whatever test it failed on, you can right-click on the virtual machine that you want to test and choose Start. When we do that, it will boot up in a troubleshooting mode. So it will bring up its application group dependencies if it's a VM. Otherwise, if it's an application group VM, it will bring itself up and any of the other dependent servers as well. And when it fails its testing, it will remain operational. So you can go in and query this. Now, I use this, a personal kind of note from the field here, to troubleshoot a port test that really had me puzzled. I had a server that I was trying to test a port. It was just an appliance. I couldn't integrate with it locally or sign in or anything. I just needed to do a port test to make sure that a service was operational. And the port test was failing. But whenever I investigated, everything was working. So in this scenario, I opened troubleshooting mode. I connected to the application group VM, and then I started doing a port ping test effectively. And what I noticed was that my default timeout was set to 120 seconds, but the service was taking a much smaller pocket of time to open above this threshold. It was taking around 123 seconds, but it was just enough that when my test script ran, it failed. So instead, all I did was I increased it from 120 seconds to 140 to allow for these kind of I/O fluctuations, and I never had that problem again. Now, final tip on this slide, creating a separate test for health checks. So it is desirable to do a full validation of every single sector within every single one of your backups. But historically, if you've got lower performance backup storage and a large amount of protected data, then backup file integrity checks might not complete in a timely manner. Now, V11A introduced some improvements for the health checks where it could run a lot more asynchronous reads and effectively performing these tests in parallel, multiple VMs, and we saw lovely speed improvements. But within Sure Backup, this isn't the case. Everything is still sequential, and it is going to take a lot of time. So you might decide, for example, and one of the common approaches I take is I want to test every backup that's taken, especially for the more mission critical servers such as SQL databases. But I might not have enough time to test this every day. So I'll create a separate weekly job or monthly job that will perform this longer health check test for me. So moving on to some of the other common stumbling blocks I found. That's right, I do have 2 slides of this stuff. Is that Sure Replica, I often see people get tripped up by the fact that they've configured ReIP within their replica job, and then they wonder why it's not taking effect in testing. They start configuring all of their masquerade rules based on their ReIP rules, but ReIP only gets applied when you actually perform a failover of the VM from VBR. It does not take place within a Sure Backup. And this is by design. This is because we don't actually want to, at any point, touch our production network. So we're going to use the original IPs just within our isolated space there. Now, the final kind of common stumbling block that I want to talk about is when Veeam backup replication and the virtual lab are on different subnets, you're going to need to configure sufficient routing between these networks. Now, we looked previously at the route table and how we effectively get all that traffic between the sites, between the VBR server and the proxy appliance and then into our isolated VMs. But that only works if the VBR and proxy appliance sit on the same subnet. So if they're not in the same subnet, then what's going to happen is it's going to ignore that route within its route table, and it's going to look at any other routes, and if it hasn't got anything else available, it's going to reach the default gateway. So we've got 2 options as to how we can still achieve a kind of cross-network connectivity between VBR and the proxy appliance. The first one is, I would say, the more preferred method, routing via your gateways. So in this scenario, I've got a VBR server 10.0.0.1, its default gateway is .254. We've then got our switch here, which is our default gateway. That also has a second leg. We'll call this an MPLS between our production network and our DR network. That's on 10.200.0.1. The DR network side, same subnet, just .2. And then this has 10.1.0.254 as its default gateway IP. Our proxy appliance is 10.1.0.1. And then we've got our final test VM here with our NAT that we discussed earlier. So presuming that the DR network and the production network can normally talk to each other, what we need to do is we need to add additional routes onto this network. So when we consider, we create our packet and we have a look at our route table. Okay, the proxy appliance doesn't exist in our network. We're going to send it to the default gateway. So here we add a route to say, okay, you want to get to 10.100.0.0 subnet. Well, rather than send it out to the ISP, and whenever an ISP gets a private IP address subnet and it's not seeing it for an MPLS or something, if it's going to route it over the internet, it will drop it because it's a private IP subnet. We don't want that. It's never going to get to destination. So instead, we add the route on this switch that says, okay, look, you want to get to 10.100, that's fine. I've got a route here. I'm going to send you over to the DR network here. My next hop is 10.200.0.2. And then at this point, we can say, oh, okay, you want to get to 10.100? Well, that's not a network I'm currently on, but I've got a next hop for it. I'm in the same network as its proxy appliance. That's my next hop. I'll send the traffic down to there. And then, as you can imagine, it gets to the test VM absolutely fine. This is no different to how multi-site networks tend to be created and how communication between different sites and subnets typically works, but this can be a new concept for backup administrators, hence I believe it's worth us talking about here. The other way, and I'm not advocating this overly, but it does work in a pinch, is you could route via a VPN. I've had a couple of scenarios whereby there's been multiple IT solutions providers involved with a customer, and they just don't want to play along. The idea of adding an additional route to them was ridiculous. They control the networking, we're providing the backup. They know their network, they don't need it. In such a scenario, if you are finding that you're not able to control all of the hops along the way, you could use a VPN to achieve the same results without messing with the existing route tables. This is based on the assumption that we have got the routing between the sites. We just can't add an extra subnet here for our test subnet. So what we can do is typically, people think VPN and they think internet. Well, that's not the only application for a VPN. VPNs are effectively just encrypting traffic and targeting a particular IP address. From a high level perspective, that's no different to browsing a website using HTTPS encryption. Especially, with large corporations, you never actually hit the endpoint directly. You hit, say, a load balancer, and then it tunnels it internally, just like what we were seeing before. Now, in fact, there's actually a whole VPN type called SSL VPN that operates on the same port as HTTPS because of the difficulty with people trying to block that in public networks, but I digress. If you're unable to configure the routing tables for all your devices between the proxy appliance and your VBR server, but you have that network ability to communicate between those sites, which is me just saying DR network, production network can talk, then what we can do instead is we could add a VPN server into our DR site within the same subnet as the proxy appliance and just use this with the next hop for the 10.100 traffic. So Veeam used to have, and unfortunately it's now retired, a solution called a Veeam PN that achieved this, but any other VPN server you want to spin up can more or less achieve this. So for our demonstration, it's the same network as before, but all we're doing is we're adding a 10.1.0.2 IP for our VPN server. So the VBR server authenticates against the VPN server, and it just adds a route into its route table to say, look, 10.100, we can achieve this with our proxy appliance via the VPN as our next hop. So what then happens is we get this packet, and this packet is addressed for the VPN server initially. It's encrypted. No one knows where it's actually supposed to go. So we say our next hop's the VPN server, so our switches will carry it through without actually knowing that we're trying to get to 10.100. The VPN server will decrypt that packet, and it will say, oh, actually, you want to go to 10.100. I've got a route for that via this proxy appliance. So it takes the packet, addresses it to the proxy appliance, sends it back up to the switch, over to the proxy appliance. That's when we perform our NAT, converting the 10.100 to whatever IP our test VM was, and it's delivered. Now, again, it's ugly, it's less practical, but it's certainly a trick that you can keep your short backup implementation working whilst you're battling through any red tape. So that brings me to the end of my kind of common stumbling blocks. Anything you want to throw in there, Craig?
Just to go back on a couple of things, the point about you don't have to test everything. Treat it like your backup policies. You don't have to back up everything every day. So when you're compiling your application groups and your jobs, just keep it as simple as possible. Don't make it all-encompassing one big job with everything. The testing you do, you were talking about you can create custom scripts. You can put anything you want in them. If I remember from memory, as long as there's an exit code, the exit code can either be 0 or 1. 0 is successful, 1 is an error, and it will stop. So you can wrap it up any way you want, but as long as there's an exit code on the back of that. And the biggest stumbling block for me that I came across, and it kind of unlocked the whole sure backup, was for me is when you're setting up the networking, is this production networking, production network. There should be, in brackets before that, lab production network. It's what you consider to be production network relative to your virtual lab. Once you get that, and once you get the routing into your head, it starts to make sense, and you can do so many great things. You know, we've been talking in chat about, you know, doing application testing, and somebody made a great example there about testing forest and domain, Active Directory changes, you know, isolated away from everything. So yeah, all good stuff.
Brilliant. So that brings us on to our what's new in V12 for Sure Backup. So far, this session has been focused on building everyone's knowledge on Sure Backup, but for anyone that's already using Sure Backup, well, here's a couple of things that are new. We've already looked at a few. We've looked at Windows Firewall and the ability to automatically disable that. One of my favorite new things here is Sure Backup for agents. So previously, we've been able to restore agent backups to vSphere and Hyper-V in many different ways, including, you know, instant VM recovery. But we've been missing a key skill, the ability to validate our agent backups automatically. And that changes with V12. You can see here that I've got a Windows Server agent backup job. And then when I've gone to create a Sure Backup job, you can see that I link this job exactly the same as if it was a vSphere backup job or a Hyper-V backup job. All the other options are the same that we looked at earlier, roles, credentials, etc. It's all there. And a tip that I would like to add with this as well. So sometimes you might be using an agent because it's part of a cluster and it is still a virtual machine. So you might already have your integration services running, such as the Hyper-V Heartbeat service or VMware tools. That's not always the case. Sometimes you've got physical servers and you want to know that that backup is good. So if you want to leverage that Heartbeat functionality, or if you're planning on, you know, as part of your DR scenario, P2V in that server, physical to virtual, running that within your vSphere or Hyper-V environment, I would make sure that you've not got Hyper-V integration services disabled within the server. If you're on the Hyper-V world or with vSphere, I would be pre-installing and patching VMware tools. It will save you time and headaches in a DR scenario, and it enables you to do heartbeat testing with your Sure Backup for agents as well. The other key thing that I want to talk about here, and this is only part of the big Veeam mover piece, but it's the part that's relevant most to Sure Backup, is the ability to move backups from one job to another. Well, what relevance does this have to Sure Backup, you might be thinking? A common theme I've noticed with customers is that when they're implementing Veeam, they're not looking at Sure Backup as a day one exercise. Instead, once the dust has settled, they're exploring the available features within the product, they decide to implement Sure Backup, and suddenly they realize that as Sure Backup targets entire backup jobs and replication jobs, those jobs haven't been designed with Sure Backup in mind. And what do I mean by this? Well, if I've got a daily backup job, just a single daily backup job for all of my 200 servers, they've got various roles in there. You know, I've got IIS servers, SQL servers, Exchange servers, etc. Well, configuring the roles to validate on this, I would have to do a one-to-one mapping of role to VM, role to VM. And that is not going to scale well. And additionally, when we're using Sure Backup, as you quite rightly alluded to beforehand, because it's verifying everything within a backup job, you might decide that your SQL servers need validation every day, but your IIS servers might only need once a week, for example. But if they're in the same job, well, we don't get that flexibility. And this is where the move back up to another job functionality really helps. We could create a job for our IIS servers and then assign the web server validation role in Sure Backup to this backup job, which enables all the scaling that we want. And it also allows us to schedule that as a separate job, separate frequencies compared to our SQL servers. So we can achieve both of those goals there. Now, there are a few different scenarios to consider when you are moving backups between jobs, such as the jobs being locked and disabled for the entirety of the move, things like that. Veeam have done an excellent job here of going through all the details of this. So if you scan that QR code on screen, it will take you straight to the Help Center documentation that discusses everything about moving backups between jobs. Now, just to kind of reiterate this, why on earth is this a good benefit to us? Well, previously to V12, what we would do is if we needed to realign all these backup jobs, we're going to have to create a new backup job, target all the servers within that, and then we have to run an active full backup, which that could have all sorts of onwards implications. That could be more consumption in object storage because we've already got it offloaded there and now we've got another copy. It could mean that actually we now need to do a backup copy that's quite restricted, within the MPLS network to another site. All these things that we need for reaching our 32110 rule. But with move back up to another job, that's not the case. Instead, it will migrate that chain to the other job, and that chain can continue without requiring another active full. Huge, huge efficiency gain there. So that is it for the death by slides, almost. I've got one final slide I want to show you, and it's just going to give you a picture of what we're about to demo, okay? So what we're going to look at is I've got 2 ESXi hosts. I've got a Linux server here of 10.0.0.1. That is running in production and will prove that that is working. It's a web server, so it's just got the Apache start page for us. We've got a Veeam backup replication server set on the same physical switch as ESXi01 and ESXi02. ESXi02 hasn't got anything running on it. What we're about to do is we're going to create our virtual lab. We don't need an application group in this scenario, but we're then going to target our web server backup job. We're going to target the web server role. We're also going to configure this static IP that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to see it all fly. So with that in mind, let's get started. So I'm just going to bring over my VMware workstation. So hopefully everyone can see that. The font on it is pretty small, so I might just reshare my screen with on the other screen. Just 1 second. So I don't want anyone to need glasses at the end of this presentation because of me. So let's now share my screen again. And okay, hopefully this is a bit better. Can everyone read that okay, or should I adjust the DPI?
Yes. Okay.
Fair enough. I'll tell you what, we'll adjust it anyway. Let's as I say, I don't want anyone complaining about their eyesight because of me. So let's just reopen.
Anyway.
Yeah. This is a problem. Really, I'm just compensating for myself and the fact that I was
going to say, you're trying to blame everybody else, but it's just you.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking if I'm struggling to read it, then God knows what it's going to look like on a GoToMeeting. There we go. So just going to reopen Veeam Backup Replication Virtual V12 for us. Now, as I was mentioning, there we go, DPI scaling. I've got a backup job here called Web Server, and we've got our Web01 server on here. What we're going to do now is we're going to create our application, sorry, not our application group, we're going to create our virtual lab, and we're going to create our short backup. So to do this, we're going to pop down to backup infrastructure. We can see I've already got my ESXi hosts on here. Half-life reference for anyone that gets it as well. And we're going to jump over to short backup. Now, this is where I mentioned in the slides early on, you see virtual lab, application group, and short backup job. These now make sense to us, and we should be able to piece this all together. But when you're coming to it in the first instance, it doesn't really make sense. So we're going to add a virtual lab, and we're just going to call this ESXi 002 virtual lab. I won't worry about description, and we're going to choose the host. So as I mentioned, ESXi 001, that is running our production server. So we're going to choose ESXi 002. You'll then see here, we've got the resource pool, and we've got a folder that, well, it's actually just updated to say, well, it's a standalone host. We're not going to create a folder in that instance, but it's still going to create a resource pool for us. Move on to data store. We can choose to redirect the write cache. Now, I could do in this case, but it's actually going to be running on the same data store anyway, because the backup repository is virtual. Bad practices all around here because it's a demo lab, but hey, we're not going to really get much benefit. As I mentioned, the most important tick box here, use proxy appliance in this virtual lab. So yes, we want to use it. By default, it's just going to call it the name that we gave it. We choose what data store we want and which network we want it on. So I have just got, again, because this is a test, my production network is the generic VM network. Now we get to the IPv4 address. We can either let it just join our production network, grab DHCP IPs. I don't want this. I'm going to configure this statically. So I'm going to go 10.0.0.3, and then I'm actually just going to bring back up my slide deck over here, because if I start giving you all the wrong IPs, then we're in trouble. But yeah, so let's add the subnet. It's just a normal /24 network, and its gateway is going to be .254, and that's going to be its DNS server. Again, you can see here, because I've adjusted the DPI, it's falling off screen a little. I don't need this to be an internet proxy, so I'm going to leave that disabled. Now, I deliberately left this out of the slides because I wanted to show you here. When we get to networking, we've got 3 options normally. The last one's grayed out, and I'll explain why in a second. You get your basic single host, which is where Veeam's going to try to automatically configure the networking for us, or advanced single host. What this is looking at is, okay, can I detect the DHCP settings normally? So what's the gateway for this environment? What's the subnet mask? All that kind of thing for your production networks, and try to pull that in. This is where, as you mentioned, Craig, we've got this production network and our production network lab. So we're going to manually create this. Now, all we've got here are the options to do this on the single host, and that means all of our virtual machines, as the name implies, are going to run on a single ESXi host. But again, if you've got large test scenarios you want to play with, then you might benefit from multi-host, especially if you've got a dev or test environment. I mean, we all do, just some people are lucky enough to have separate production ones. So if you want to use advanced multi-host, there are a couple of constraints around this. The main one being is that you need to have the Enterprise Plus edition of VMware vSphere. This is because, well, you need any version that will include the distributed virtual switch. Some people might be rocking older 6.x vSphere environments with the enterprise license. If I remember correctly, that included it, but you need distributed virtual switch. You also need to build the network manually. This is where we go back to that mindset of, well, all we actually need to do is we create an isolated VLAN. We put the host within that and we tell it to use it. But let's move on. We've got advanced single host, and it's going to attempt to look at the network, and it's going to see, okay, can I actually work out by default what my VM network normally uses for, as I say, its subnet range, its network address, its default gateway. It can't work it out, and that's fine. I deliberately didn't want this because I wanted to build this with you. This is where we create these isolated networks that we looked at earlier. So we choose what our production network is called. So I'll go into my production host here in our vSwitch, and I find my VM network. And it's going to automatically create an isolated vSwitch and virtual network on there for us. So this will just call it ESXi 002 Virtual Lab VM Network. So it's the name of the virtual lab and then the name of the production network. Again, if we were throwing this back to a physical switch, we might want to put different VLAN IDs on, or again, if we've got multiple networks, we could put virtual switch still supports VLAN IDs, so we could add those in there. We don't need to worry about any of that for this. Then what we need to do is we need to configure our proxy appliance. Now you might be thinking, well, hang on, back here we gave it its IP. We gave it its production IP. Within our isolated network, it needs to have an IP address still. So once again, I've selected this and it's going to go, okay, can I work out the network settings? No, I can't. So this effectively is still the production network, but just in the isolated space. So what do I mean by that? Well, our production network was 10.0.0.0.0, and that was with 255.255.255.0, okay? Now, we aren't specifying the network here. What we're specifying is commonly what our server's default gateway is, because we looked at, okay, how do we make the traffic flow into the isolated network? But the proxy appliance still needs to have an IP within the isolated network where it can accept the packets that respond back. If we send a ping, we need to get a reply. So I mentioned earlier, the default gateway is .254. So that's what we're going to configure it for. Now we go back to our masquerade network address here. This is where we create our dummy networks. When I mentioned, okay, our production's 10.0.0. Whatever IP we want within that subnet, here we specify our fake network as such, our isolated network that we're going to IP masquerade against. So this is going to be 10.100.0. We can enable DHCP on the service, so if you're used to relying on DHCP in your production network, Veeam can do that in the back end for you. I don't need this. I'm going to disable it. If we had multiple networks as well, potentially you're testing servers for a DMZ as well as a LAN, you can choose whether you allow network traffic to be able to route between those VNICs or not. Could come in handy if you've got an Exchange environment and you want to actually test that, any of your edge transport servers can communicate, etc. So our final setting here for the virtual lab is one we already talked about before, defining static IP address mapping. So one of the things I want to do is, I just want to show off this feature. So we're going to say our isolated IP, this is the IP of the virtual machine we're testing against. This is 10.0.0.1, our Linux web server. We need to give it an access IP. So I'm just going to choose 10.0.0.10. I'm going to call this Apache 2, Ubuntu, Web 01. No, mouse went off screen there. Stop typing. Web 01. Okay, and that's it. Our virtual lab is building itself for us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to redrag this over on the screen here just to reiterate what we're looking at. We've got our production host, our production VM, and now what we've actually done is say, okay, we'll create this virtual appliance for us, create the static IP. We're halfway there. What we need to do now is create the job that says test this VM for us. So let's do it. So let's update the VMX file. So what I want to show you is I'm cutting no corners here. This is a complete live demo. So let's open up Edge here. We can see, okay, here's our ESXi 001 server. Let's sign into it. And what I'm going to do as well while that's loading is I'm just going to ping. Oh, no, I haven't started the VM. That would come in handy, wouldn't it? Let's bring up the Ubuntu server and just give it a second to boot. And while we're doing that, I'll bring up the other host again to prove we've not got anything else running. Now I've made two other bookmarks here. So first of all, the web server. So now that has booted and we should be able to see that with a ping test. Why are you not answering the ping now? Of course, all goes wrong in production, doesn't it? But yeah, we should have our server up. In all honesty, it could just be Apache's boot before the rest of it has finished starting yet. So yeah, that's still booting. We'll say that not everything's out yet. And then we've got our, typically this has actually cached the pages. I think that's what we're seeing here. So I've just done a Control F5 refresh. Good old Edge giving us a cached web page because it's determined static content. We can see here Apache's not loading on 10.0.0.1. And for my static IP, virtual lab's not running. Static IP is going to resolve nothing. Those will time out eventually. We can see now the Ubuntu server has booted, so I should now be able to ping it. Why is it making a liar of me today? You watch this where I find that it's IP config all failed. There we go. So it's got 10.0.0.1 anyway, so that's fine. It's just not playing ball for me. Okay, I can live with that. As long as it actually starts answering for me. This is what I said to you at the beginning, wasn't it, Craig? I said it's either going to add to the amazing week I've been having, or it's all going to go great. That's fine. We'll configure a short backup job, and then we'll look at what's going on. There's going to be a reason behind it. So we're going to create a short backup test web. So we choose our virtual lab here. We don't need an application group. We're going to link our jobs. So our job here, web server. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a role. So we're just going to say web server. We don't need any credentials for this test, anything like that. I am going to attempt to keep the ping on any network interface on here. We'll see if we can work out what's going on. But yeah, in terms of maximum lab boot time, let's give it just 3 minutes and then an extra 30 seconds for IS to start afterwards. So this is where I mentioned as well about health checks. We could scan all the blocks, we can do malware scans as well, and then we can run the job on the schedule. So if you wanted to run it every time you make a new backup, run a new job automatically after web server backup. We don't need that for this test. So let's run the job when I click finish. And what we'll see here is we've got ESXi02. So we've got our virtual lab. You can see here we haven't got a Web 01 server at this point in time, but we're going to make it. And I say we, I mean Veeam. Veeam's going to do all the heavy lifting for me. See, it's reconfiguring the virtual lab for me. It's going to power it on. And then once it's powered on, it's going to start to boot that server for me. So, right. In the meantime, let's find out what's going on here. So first, I'm going to do a root print just to show you, because not everything's started yet. Again, not cutting any corners here. We haven't got our 10.10.IPs, etc. This is all a normal production network. So my IP address here is, if it's actually going to show it, we've got 10.0.0.2. That's fine. And then go into our ESXi host. Of course, it's all on a go slow for me now, isn't it? I did think I could have pre-recorded it, but I thought there's no fun in that, is there?
No. Is it really a demo unless something goes wrong?
It has to be when we do a demo, doesn't it? But there we go. We've got my custom virtual network inside for the host. We know that that itself is working because VBR can communicate to these servers. So let's have a look at the networking. We can see it's configured 10.0.0.1.
It's on the right network.
Yeah, it's on the right network. For all we know, it could just be something simple as a stale ARP. But in the meantime, let's see it boot up. What I'll say otherwise is if I do find that for whatever reason this doesn't want to work, then we'll just carry on with the session. I'll show you it actually working in the end and show you where it went wrong, but wouldn't be surprised if this was just ARP or something. All right, so here we go. We can see the Web01 server. It has now registered it. So if I go over to storage, we can see here that we've created our NFS. So this is vPower NFS service backed data store. If I drill into this, we'll actually see, let's go back to our virtual machines. We've got our Web01 VM. And we can see that it's sat on that NFS data store and it's now booting for us. So just to make it more fun. So I think that what's happened is this web server's decided to completely stab me in the back and go for some interesting firewall rule, because I can ping the VBR server, but it's just not letting anything in right now.
No.
So it'd be interesting if it does it in the backup, because it was working before with the backup. And here we go. Yeah, stale up, nothing else. We can now reply to ping. We can now see the default web page.
Live troubleshooting, folks.
Yeah,
Live troubleshooting.
Exactly. But you know what? I would have rathered that. There would have always been that bit of doubt if, I'd gone, oh, okay, let's take this off screen and, oh, look, here's Blue Peter. Here's the one I made earlier. No, we're seeing it live. You're finding the fun and games of, well, if you're like me and you're a bit impatient, then sometimes you can slow yourself down with it. More haste, less speed and all that. So we're just watching this web server boot up. Now, what I want to show you is you can see, just like a normal backup job, the statistics. So we can see, here's my web server, it's starting, heartbeat's pending, ping pending, script is pending. We're not validating. When it says validation here, we're not going to start doing anything with the disk checking. We're not going to do any AV scanning either. Now, you'll notice that this looks a bit like a hyperlink, and it is. If you click on that and you've got the VMware Remote Console installed, it will actually open up the console of that server for you. It will just ask you to sign in to the ESXi server or vCenter as appropriate. But we can see here, it's all booting up. So powering on, we'll give it 180 seconds to boot up, and we can see actually it has booted for us. So what I can do now is, if I show the root print, we can see it added that extra root. We can see it's going to the proxy appliance. Everything is as it should be. So now if I ping 10.100.0.1, I'm actually pinging that isolated web server before Veeam is even ready for it. So we can see here, it's about to start its heartbeat test now. Heartbeat is successful because we can see, if I drop back here, we can see VMware Tools is on. So yeah, heartbeat works great. And then we can see the ping test. So it's now trying to ping it. I will find it amusing if it fails on that ping once again, just to shoot us in the foot. Could very well be doing that for us again. So let's just have a look on the console. again. Oh, sorry, it's not 10, is it? It's .1. There we go. So yeah, that ping test is there fine. The ping test was successful on here as well. So it's now given 30 seconds for Apache to start, because that's the application initialization time I set for it. It's now finished. Now it's going to run our test scripts. Web server was okay, and now it's powering it off, and I'm registering it all. And that's it. So that is running. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do once this job finishes, just as kind of a final to show you everything, I didn't get a chance to show you because it shut it down once it was done, that static IP mapping. If I start in troubleshooting mode, we'll see it all start up again, and then I'll be able to actually access it on the static IP we assigned on this virtual lab, which, just while we're waiting for it all, to reiterate, is if I'm in the production network and I want to start poking in my dev environment from the outside, well, I don't need to expose the servers themselves. I can just do static IP mapping, so the isolated network stays isolated, and I'm just kind of poking in with bits that I want to see. So I've got this rule here to say, okay, if I try to connect to 10.0.0.10, you're actually going to forward that to the 10.0.0.1 VM within our isolated network, which is the web server. So whilst we wait for that to start, I think really I've covered everything else I wanted to talk about today. I mean, anything you want to add to this, Craig?
No, I think you've done a fantastic job there of covering everything from the basics all to doing it live. And just the live demo just goes to show you how you just have to be careful and pick your way through that. You have to have an idea of what your networking looks like. That is, you've got to nail the networking.
Definitely.
Can't stress that enough. You've got to absolutely nail the networking to get that done. But once it does, once it's in and running, it's such a useful tool. Underrated, I think, by a lot of people, but it's such a powerful tool.
Definitely. So in which case, I know we're poking over for time, but while we're waiting for it to start up, any questions from anyone with regards to your backup? Any issues you've seen in the field? Or means just drop them in now.
Hi, Michael. So it's Rob. A quick one. If you've got multiple application groups, multiple apps, SAP and Exchange, everything flying about, and you sort of want to set up, okay, I'm going to test SAP and I'm going to do this. Do you have to have or is it better to have a proxy appliance per application group, or can you share the same proxy appliance?
As long as your jobs aren't going to overlap with each other, then yeah, you could use the same virtual lab. That's not a problem. It all depends, again, that age-old consultant phrase, isn't it? It depends. But I would say, yeah, if you're just going to run these sequentially, one of the things I didn't talk about during the slides really, and maybe I should have mentioned, when we were talking about those IO constraints of, with reading from backups and things like that, one of the things that Veeam doesn't really take into account is that as long as the backup file's not locked, we can do sure backup testing on it. But that doesn't mean that the disks aren't under any strain. If we finish a backup job and then we decide, okay, we're going to now do a backup copy immediately as well as a short backup, well, we're reading all these blocks as fast as we can. So if we start doing all these tests in parallel, we can start to cause additional headaches. So what it might make sense to do is say, okay, I've got all these short backup jobs I want to run daily. I'm just going to schedule them to run sequentially after each other. That would probably make sense. It saves you building multiple virtual labs.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more for any more?
Well, I'll pick up an interesting point that Adrian, just to let everyone know, we've got Adrian from Veeam, Adrian Lowe, one of the cloud SEs from Veeam on the call today. And Adrian made a good comment about being able to sanitize your backups, malware scanning and that kind of thing, doing that. And that's a great example. But I'm going to get a bit contentious here. I would even like to see that go a step further. I like to see, rather than having to set up all the manual jobs and all that kind of thing, the data's sitting there. I'd like to see it just being tested in the background without this. There's a sure backup set up once, and then it just tests it every day without having to manage it. That backup data sitting there in the background. Kind of off topic a little bit, but it's kind of relevant because it is using the virtual labs and sure backup. But I would probably like to see us going down the route where the data's sitting there idle for days, day on, day out. Let's test that automatically every day.
Agreed. And that kind of ties into Veeam. I remember for a while they're talking about the data reuse part of what they effectively refer to as data labs. And you've obviously a great point there, validating, all your virtual machines are clean and squeaky. I've also seen other people use Sure Backup with stuff like the static IP mapping for, okay, I need to bring up a second instance of a SQL server. It doesn't matter, it's last night's data. I'm just going to hit it hard with a load of reports, but I don't want it to impact production. So let's spin it up, do the static IP mapping again, throw an FQDN against it, do all my testing, and then shut it down before, some naughty customers might do it where they say, oh, I'll shut it down before Microsoft auditing starts rolling around and I've got an extra SQL server up and running. But, I'm not here to judge on that one. But just whilst I'm talking again here, so we can see if I go back to, so we can ping that static IP that I mentioned, which is forward into the 10.0.0.1 IP, and we can see here if I do a Control F5 refresh, we've hit the Apache 2 default page. If I then decided to go one step further, and I'm not gonna, we've really run out of time here. If I wanted to, I could even start editing that web page within the test environment and start pinging, here's what's different between them. But with that, I would just like to thank everyone for listening to me waffle on for well over an hour now, and I will yield back to Craig. Thank you, guys.
Not waffling at all, Michael. It just shows you how powerful, because you're talking about it for so long, how powerful a feature it is. And like we say, it's underused, but once you learn the fundamentals of your networking, your application groups, virtual labs, everything, it comes together. It's quite a powerful tool. But no, yeah, excellent session. Thanks very much for that. And I will switch that back to me. Jim Jones, there's literally no end to stupid Sure Backup tricks. I think that's, yeah.
Definitely.
That's a good one. Right, we're going to skip the sessions up a little bit. So, yep, we're going to switch over to Ian now. So, for those on the call who are using Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, I hope you're aware of some of the API changes that Microsoft made recently. Ian's going to take it a bit further and give us a bit more insight on exactly what that means to you for using the product. Ian, are you ready to go?
I am. I just need to figure out how to use GoToMeeting.
I'm just going to send you to you're the presenter, and you should be able to just share your screen.
Oh yeah, there we go. Right, I think we're good. Yeah, so this is a session about some of the changes Microsoft are introducing with their Microsoft 365 offering and how it impacts us, the end users for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. So I'll click through. I'm going to try and keep this as short and sweet as possible. But I guess over the last 12 months, we've seen Microsoft introduce a few changes. You may have seen they deprecated the use of basic authentication last year, which I think is a welcome move, honestly. Turning off basic authentication reduces that attack surface for your Microsoft 365 organization. But they're taking this a step further, and this is really causing some, well, in my opinion, some unneeded confusion and additional configuration required for backing up some of your Microsoft 365 data. So each of these slides, you'll see the QR code in the corner if you want to see a link to where I have grabbed all of these screenshots from. Just point your phone at it and you'll see the full page. But yeah, so last year, I think it was July last year, Microsoft announced the end of being able to access Microsoft Teams data via Exchange Web Services. And they touted that the reason for that is it was an unsupported scenario, and they've created something called the Graph Export API for Teams, which is great. I mean, we're all familiar with APIs. What's not so great though is they introduced a cost with accessing this API, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So just to summarize what exactly this impacts with your backups. So today you can back up SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Exchange Online, and Microsoft Teams data. So Microsoft Teams channels, all of the files that exist in there, the shared mailboxes, all of that good stuff. What has changed means for us, though, is the person who's in charge of the backup, so wants to back up this information. They've really honed in and focused on one particular data type, and I'm really not sure why, but that is the chat messages that exist within Microsoft Teams, and in particular the chat messages that exist within the channel teams. So instant messages in Teams were never protected, or not officially protected by Veeam, and this just reinforces that stance. All you're able to back up is these Teams channel chat messages. So the cost, you can see at the top of the screen there, and this is the fun thing, Microsoft have introduced a cost for that API call, in this case to retrieve the message from Microsoft Teams, which is, as you can see, 0.00075 cents per message called, which seems minuscule, but if you're familiar with accessing Azure Blob or S3 or anything else that requires or incurs a cost for accessing those APIs, you know full well that those costs stack up very quickly. So what I have on the screen here is a method to help you estimate what that cost may look like if this is something you wish to do in terms of backing up those Teams channel chat messages. So in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, this has changed recently as well. I was quite surprised when I checked this out in a good way, that they've now changed and made it easier to verify what kind of information is flowing through your Microsoft 365 organization. So the screenshot here, we can see the channel usage, and at the bottom which we have numbered number 3, we can see the number of channel messages. So as an example, let's say your organization sent 1,000 channel messages a day at the cost mentioned at the top of the screen there, then that's going to cost you 75 cents per day to back up those channel messages. I hope that's all making sense so far. So we'll jump through onto subscriptions. Now, the way this is billed and tracked, this does not form part of any existing Microsoft 365 license subscription that you already have. So you might have Business Premium, E3, A3, you might have like Azure AD Premium P2, whatever it is, the cost for those APIs is not covered in those license subscriptions. And the QR code there for considerations, that will take you to a Microsoft article which highlights the differences between a license and subscription. It's a pretty good article. But yeah, so to be able for Microsoft to charge you for these API calls, you need to have a subscription in Azure. So the example I have here on screen, there's no subscription present, so you would need to create one. Number of different subscription types available. You can have pay as you go against a credit card. If you purchase Microsoft 365 through a cloud service provider program, a CSP, you could bolt on an Azure subscription that way. You might have one as part of an enterprise license agreement. You know, there's a whole host of ways you can get an Azure subscription. You might even have some free credits bundled in with one of those agreements already in place. But the fact remains, a subscription needs to exist. So just circling back to the end of life for basic authentication, one of the other things that this meant with the switch to modern authentication is when you validate the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 application against your Azure tenancy, it creates something called an application registration, and that is the piece that allows the access to the Microsoft 365 data for Veeam. Now, this app registration needs to be associated with this subscription. So again, this only works with modern application authentication. Yeah, you need to set up a subscription. But not only that, here's the other fun thing. Access to the API isn't just enabled by default. So this is the really fun part of it. You have to request access to the Graph Export Teams API that's used for this. And like I say, all it does is it allows you to consume chat messages from Teams. That is literally all it does. But to do that, you've got to go through an application form. And again, if you want to look at the full application form, check out the QR code on the screen there. It will take you to that. Fun fact, since July last year, Microsoft has changed this form at least 4 times that I know of. So it's one to keep an eye on. The requirements change ever so slightly with each iteration of the form. Another fun fact, this is like stuff I get from my kids' school, like what school dinner do you want? You fill in a form, it goes off, someone receives a form and does something with it. This is exactly the same thing here. It's not automatic. This form goes to someone at Microsoft. They look at it and go, yep, that's good. You can have access to the API, and away you go. So that introduces a little bit of time until access to those APIs is even granted. So something to be aware of. And you see on the screen there, I'm sure it tells you an estimated time. Actually, not on that screenshot. Yeah, so there's a number of things that ask for, like email address, why you want to do this, what's it going to be used for, etc., etc. But I want to highlight some of the things that might be a little bit more difficult to gather in terms of information, and that's you'll need to have to hand the app registration name, the GUID associated with that app registration, and as we'll see as I click through the rest of this slide deck, the tenant ID for your Azure subscription. So to grab that, and again at the very end of this, I've got a link to a full blog which highlights exactly step by step how to do this. But just for the purpose of this demo, you click into Azure, you click into Azure AD, you browse app registrations, and you can find the app registration that Veeam has created. And there's also an application ID that's associated with that. So you need those 2 pieces of information for the application form. And the other one, as I mentioned, is the tenant ID as well to submit for that. Yeah, then once you click submit, you'll get an email similar to this. You play the waiting game, and then at some point Microsoft will grant you access to those APIs, and then you can ultimately back up those chat messages in the Teams channel. So my advice is I would think long and hard about whether or not those chat messages are actually important to you as an organization to protect, and if you need to recover them, that is the only thing that's not protected since this change was introduced by Microsoft. And one other thing that's worth pointing out as well, Veeam supported this with version 6A of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. So if you're running an older version, it would also need to be upgraded to support this functionality. And yeah, that was it. I did rush through it a little bit, but if you want to see full step-by-step guide on that, there's a URL at the top, or point your phone at that QR code and grab it, and that will highlight in detail how to go through, create a pay-as-you-go subscription, etc., etc. So yeah, I know it's short and sweet, but any questions?
Have you noticed anything that acts as a blocker in getting API access enabled? You know, have you seen any customers run into troubles that have delayed things?
So I have not, but there's so that link I posted before, and there's also a Veeam article on this. It's very prescriptive in the text that you put into the form as to why you want access to the API. It boils down to, I need to be able to back up this data with Veeam. That's what we're asking for. If you put something else in there, I'm not sure, Craig, that might cause some issues. But I personally have not seen any rejections on that.
Cool.
Just
All
flicking
good. Any
through
more
the chat.
questions? Any more questions from anyone? I've put it in the chat, but how many people who are using Microsoft 365 product from Veeam were aware of this change coming in, and how many actually had to jump through these hoops to get that API access? I appreciate it is all dependent if you want to do the Teams chat backups, really, but how many were or weren't aware of that?
It's not very well publicized, honestly.
No.
I'll tell you what else is fun. When I was doing a little bit more research on this, I noticed Microsoft have also now created a similar form for SharePoint API access. So I hope that is not the way things are going with this.
Microsoft coming into nickel and dime everyone for access to APIs. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. So just something to be aware of. If you've not seen it before, I just wanted to highlight it for everyone on the call. And if you have, just be aware that the goalposts keep changing from Microsoft's side.
Yeah, not like Microsoft at all to do that.
Not at all.
So, okay, thanks for that, Ian. I will going to go and show my main screen again. So we're kind of, time's running away from us a little bit here, so we can quickly run through a quick V12 discussion if you want. We'll open it up for maybe say 10-15 minutes, then we'll switch to the quiz, run through the quiz, and then we'll try and end off just with a little bit of an update on the user group. How does that sound to everyone? Okay, so depending on how this session goes, we might be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. We'll see how it goes. So it's over to attendees really here. You should have the power to unmute yourself. If not, stick in the chat and we'll unmute you. We want to hear what's your favourite new feature of V12 that you've gone on. Is it direct to object? Is it true per VM backup chains? Is it the ability to move VMs between backup jobs? What you tell us. We want to try and make this session a bit more interactive rather than having you sit and watch and looking at death by PowerPoint all day. So over to you. Anybody got anything they want to add? Anything they want to contribute to the discussion? I'll end up picking on someone.
Go on. I'll kick it off because there was one which wasn't really one of the main highlight features, but I thought was really cool. Was the integration with Microsoft SQL Server in how it can now manage and control your backup jobs through the SQL Management Studio. Because having those two things separate previously was always a massive pain in the backside.
Yeah, Michael, we've got another one in there. Michael saying his was the same, the SQL plugin, being able to manage that through them.
So often I'd have customers that they got DBAs that are managing the databases themselves and can tell you the amount of times it's been, okay, well, where are you backing up your databases to? Oh, to a NAS that the backups team protect. Okay, cool. All right, well, when does that get backed up? And you find that those are out of sync, and you find that like the NAS is backed up 2 hours before the database, and basically all their backups are almost a day out of date before Veeam actually gets to, write them to anything immutable or decent, dare I say. So yeah, giving them that drive-in of, just throw it straight to a repository, we'll do the heavy lifting from there is brilliant.
Yep. There's another question. There's another one in here. Who was it? Robert. Yeah, SQL changes and direct to object storage. That's probably the headline act for V12. Is that direct to object storage? If you don't mind, can I ask what in particular about direct to object storage is it that's particularly interesting? Is it the fact that it's going to be a cheaper alternative to other storage, or is it the immutability part, or is it something else is driving that interest?
There's a weird driver actually. At the moment, we have to use the sober offload to get it into object. Otherwise, we incur a staging cost of the data. What I really want to be able to use is copy jobs so that I have complete and utter control and visibility of it. So when we get direct object storage, I'll then be able to use a copy job to take it directly through without dumping it back on the staging primary before it goes offsite. So it's a bit of a weird one, but it's really being able to use copy jobs to manage those offsite backups.
And had you considered something like the Cloud Connect part? You know, tying up with a solutions provider and doing the Cloud Connect part for that kind of.
We've had. I've actually been on a project for 3 years now, trying to bring our Veeam instance into a modern day. So we've had multiple meetings with people like Ireland. We've actually decided to go with AWS S3 through our Direct Connect connection and using S3 and Glacier as well. But yeah, we've certainly completely looked at software solutions, island type Cloud Connect solutions, etc., etc. At the moment, because where they come into play is for sort of DR type roles. So yeah, we've now got your data and we're controlling it for you, but here's an extra service of we'll get it, booted up and available to you very quickly if you have a problem, and we'll manage all that for you and make sure you're safe and secure. Unfortunately, that comes with a pretty high price, and we're not quite ready to go that sort of route yet.
Okay, and well, actually, it's interesting you're saying that, and I noticed in the comments from Andy Pilkington talking about the restore from Cloud Connect repos direct to like VMware Cloud Director, that kind of thing. So that might play in, that new feature might play in to your considerations further down, a little bit down the line. Once you land that in VCCB, the service providers can then take that landed data and then restore it to a VM from a DR perspective into vCloud Director. It's just food for thought kind of thing. Great, good questions. Loving this, getting a lot of interaction on the chats. Feel free to unmute yourselves and chat away if you need to. We're all amongst friends here. There's no such thing as a silly question, unless it's something like, "Where's your accent from, Craig?" or something like that.
Where's the accent from, Craig?
Very good, says the Geordie. Other ones, we've got the Veeam Mover, so they've been able to move data between different repositories. Yep, that's a good one. That's going to come into its own when we're moving between object block and everything in between. What else? I'm just reading through some of the questions here.
So MFA get put in there.
MFA was a good one. I'll take a claim to fame on that one, feeding back that they were actually going to lift the MFA requirement from your admin console, and I kind of argued, well, so the thinking was that if your admin console's already compromised, then it doesn't matter if you've got MFA on it or not. But I would say if you've got MFA on your Veeam console and your Veeam server is compromised, the best all they can do really is delete your Veeam instance from your admin station. But if you've got access into your Veeam console, you can delete everything. You can delete your backups, not immutable backups, but they can delete everything. So that was put back in as part of the release to allow MFA to be run on your local admin console. Just don't forget your admin details and your admin keys, please. What else have we got on the topics?
Andy, with Corruption Guard being able to schedule it, that's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah. I mean, has anyone actually went through the What's New document? It's a ridiculously long document, but there's loads of great bits and pieces hidden away in there, little snippets that not necessarily headline acts, but they make, you know, things like that being able to, you know, the corruption guard scheduling it. That little change makes a big difference to some people in here. What else have we got? Veeam Orchestrator. Yeah, that's Veeam Orchestrator. What we call it now? It's not Veeam Orchestrator. It's
Disaster recovery orchestrator.
Yeah, it's VDO. It's VDO. It's getting the name changed. Yeah, Robert, good point. Yeah, that sure back up to another level. Yeah, sure back up on steroids, basically. Yeah, good point. DRO, that's the one. Thanks, Hen. And just call out to Hen. Hen, am I right in saying you're in Canada right now? You joining us all the way from Canada? I know Jim Jones is joining us all the way from West Virginia. So although it's a UK, we've got a global audience. Good to see. Good to really see. Best practices, that good one again, Adrian. Best practices analyzer, nice easy win. Yep, all good stuff.
Well, I'll tell you one. The ransomware warranty.
Oh. Is that maybe? Can we maybe get Adrian to tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe we've got a couple of minutes here. Adrian, you able to do that?
Yeah, no comment. No, sorry. So yeah, the warranty. I work with predominantly service providers, so it's void for service providers, unfortunately. But for end users, then yeah, absolutely. There's a whole host of requirements you have to go through, but I'd have to dig them out. So apologies, I haven't got too much information on that to hand, but I can dig it out and do a follow up if need be. So apologies for that, Craig.
No worries. No, that's what it's all about. Well, what I would say then is anybody who's interested in it and wants to know more, jump onto the community forums, the community.veeam.com, sign up, post a question for discussion, or something for discussion, a topic for discussion, and yeah, that'd be a great place to continue even more than, you know, Adrian, or we can jump in. We can provide links to documentation or articles. Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Robert, are people aware of the Veeam Health Check PowerShell tool? Maybe worth a few minutes. Yeah, tell you what. Yeah, there's him saying he's from Canada. Robert, I would say let's hold that one. That's actually could be, and I'm going to put it back to you. That could be something to make a good community session for the next virtual event. Right? Have a think about that. Well, oh, controversial. Why did Veeam handle hotfix so badly? Handle hotfix so badly. Oh.
For the recent CVE thing.
Was that the CV? Yeah. Yeah, if that's a CVE thing. Or is that just hotfixes in general? I think that was, yeah, Nick. Oh, okay, got it. It was on Reddit first. Yeah, it was a timing. Yeah, I think it was a timing thing. But yeah, again, that's probably a good thing to head onto the community forums and discuss in there, because you'll get a nice wider audience in there, and you'll get a lot of people who will know the answers from higher up within that. But yeah, I think it was just a timing of the hotfix, the timing between the mail release and the Reddit post kind of thing. It's, you know, it's one of those things. It's social media is a message on social medias around the world before, you know, official marketing's got out of bed and put their boots on kind of thing. Yeah. All good. Right, shall we, again, yeah, all very good questions. If you've got any more, and you'll see later on, there's a link to the community sessions. Continue on that. Very much want to keep those those conversations going. So follow on the community hub. We can talk more and divulge a bit more and spread the conversation. I'm going to move on to the what we're going to do now, the quiz. So just make sure you're paying attention over the last couple of sessions. There's some of the questions are going to come from there. That game pin's not the right game pin at the moment. I'm going to change that. Just to remind you, the prizes are £100 Amazon, £75 Amazon vouchers, and £50 Amazon. Hopefully you've got the app installed on your device, or if you don't want to, go to the website there, kahoot.it. And Madalena, I think we're ready to start the thing. We can put it
Yes,
up on
I
the
will share my screen in a minute. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. So again, that's not the right pin code because we had a little problem getting the pin code set up. So once Madalena shares her screen, we'll be able to do that.
Can I play, Craig?
No. Yeah, leaders are not, and guest speakers.
Come on, guys, that's harsh.
But just to remind you, you are going to have to be A, correct, and B, the fastest player. So, and please put your name, put a proper name in. You can put silly names in if you want to. I can't remember if it gives you a silly name. But the 3 winners will need to reach out to Madalena.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yep, we can see your screen. We've got the game pin there,
Okay.
which is 7137528. While everybody's setting it up, Nick asked a question, when is the next Veeam user group? So there's going to be slides, a little bit of discussion about that after the just as we're closing up. And that's going to be very much, there we go. There we go, everybody's joining now. Yeah, so Nick, that's going to be very much up to what people's desire are for an in-person or a virtual event, but we'll cover that just after the quiz. Gentle Sable, Wise Hamster enters the arena. You've got to be in it to win it. We're going to give it another maybe 2 or 3 minutes to let people get in, and then we're going to kick things off. How many have we got?
Yeah, I mean, right now is a 50% chance of winning a prize. Yeah, get logged in.
Yeah, just to remind you, it's Amazon vouchers, £100, £75 and £25 Amazon vouchers. Just in time for Mother's Day. No,
I would so do that, Craig. Yeah.
Come on, folks, you know you want to get in this. Oh, here we go, Hero Puffin. There we go. Just while we're waiting on everybody else, if you've already entered the game and you've got your game name, can you put it in the comments below just to see, just so we can correlate between who the in-game name and your attendee name, just so we know we can't get people trying to pull the fast one over us and say I was Hero Puffin. There we go. Thank you, people. We need more people though. We need more. How many have we got now?
15.
Yeah,
There's 15 people who could be playing. Well, maybe it's 12. Come on, these odds are great for winning something.
They are, and I guarantee you the questions are not difficult. Well,
anyone else planning to join?
Yep.
I don't know. Hasn't
The
seen
odds are
right.
good. How many people have we got? How many players have we got then so far, Madalena?
It's 2, 4, 7.
7? We've only got 7
And
players and there's only 3
it's
prizes.
Yeah, it's 22 of us in here. Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. We're going to give it another couple of minutes. Don't need to put it on your app. You can go to the website, Kahoot.it, put the game pin in, and you can play online. So you don't even have to install anything. You can just throw it through your web browser if need be. £100, £75 and £25 Amazon vouchers up for grabs. But even better than that is bragging rights. If you come first, bragging rights that you won the quiz. That's always the way to go.
Hey, maybe we'll need like a community badge for the Veeam community forum quiz winner.
Competition winner. Yeah, there we go.
Competition, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. Doesn't get better.
If you ever fail in IT, Craig, I reckon you could get a job on one of those quiz presenting shows.
All right.
or something strawberries down the
It's down the bingo halls already.
You don't want to see this potato face on the screen too many times. Okay, so we've still got 2, 6, 7. So okay, that's it then. We're going to close it. You've had your chance. Don't say you weren't warned. Let's go ahead, Ian. You're going to read out the questions on this one.
I am, yes.
Yep. Okay, Maddie, let's go for it.
Starting.
Yep. Just remember, you've got to be fast and correct. That's how you win points.
Okay then. So question 1, what year was the first UK Veeam user group meeting held? Was it 2013, 2015, 2014, or 2016? And there's no phone a friend on this one, I'm afraid.
No.
So,
It was, of course, 2015.
well, 4 people got that right. Well done.
All right. Who was the fastest? Because you've got to be right and fast.
Going to the next one.
Oh, next one. Yep. Next one. Oh, here we go. Scoreboard so far. So Mighty Lark. Who was Mighty Lark? Mighty Lark was Dippin. Yeah, Dippin.
Yeah.
Good. Good, good, good. Okay, next question.
Attention. Number 2, where does Veeam place the proxy device by default? Is it the Power NFS share, a random S3 bucket, a predefined CIF share, or the largest production data store? Who put CIF on there? It's S&P. And it was the largest production data store.
If you're paying attention to Michael's session, you would have heard him saying the largest productions data store by default. Champion stock taking the lead, an early lead. Ooh. See, it's that easy to switch. Who's champion? That's Mark. Oh, well done, Mark. But will you stay there? Will you stay there? That's the thing. Let's go to the next question then. Question
3. Michael's lab referred to Half-Life. Who was the main protagonist in the Half-Life games? Morgan Freeman, Gordon Freeman, Martin Freeman, or Cameron Freeman? Damn, that was quick. I didn't know the answer.
Oh, yeah, Gordon Freeman. Nice.
Gordon Freeman.
Morgan Freeman. Who put Morgan Freeman?
You all read that question.
No, you don't say anything.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Mark's still in the lead. Just not a lot. Quick Octopus is on an answer streak though. Just got to be quicker with those answers. Keep it going, chaps. Keep it going.
Question 4. Here we go. Which one of these is newly supported in V12? Veeam agent. Oh, hang on. That question's not right.
For sure backup. That should be for sure
backup. Veeam agent for Windows backup. Veeam agent for AIX. CDP VMs or immutable VMs.
Nice. Again, paying attention at Michael's session. Good to see. Yeah, Veeam agent for backups.
Well done.
Yeah. If you got it right, that's good. Did you get it quick? Oh, man, there we go. Mark's staying out in front there. Just again, that's just.
See, I'm reading Champion Stock now. All I can think of is I prefer Lurpak. Where was the first UK Veeam user group meeting held? Was it Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, or London? Hey, you're quick on this.
Yeah, very quick. Very quick.
I was going to attempt to do the accents, but no. Struggle with Geordie, never mind anywhere else.
Good. Yeah, pay attention. Oh, there we go. Lead has changed again.
Oh, what happened? Champion Stock.
Quick Octopus. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see. I need to find out who's Quick Octopus.
Going to the next.
Next, yeah. Who's Quick Octopus?
Number 6. Which license level is required to run Sure backup jobs? Enterprise socket-based, Enterprise Plus socket-based, Veeam Universal License, or all of the above?
All of the above is the correct answer. Again, well done for paying attention during Michael's slides.
You can all read quicker than I can talk. Brilliant.
And how's the scores looking? Oh, Quick Octopus, that's him. Way out in front. Well, not too far in front. Again, you got to be quick. You got to be quick. Okay.
Yeah, it's all still to play for. Number
Next
7.
Question.
Which 4 core M365 applications are backed up by Veeam Backup for M365? Exchange, OneNote, SharePoint, Teams, Teams, Flow, SharePoint, OneDrive, Excel, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, or Exchange, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint.
That'll get you thinking.
I did talk about it. I rushed through it, but I did talk about it. Well done.
Nice, well done. Yep. So 5 were right, but how fast were they? Oh, it's
Champion Stalk coming back. Look at that. Number 8, how much does Microsoft charge per Graph API call for the chat's get all messages? Is it 75 cents? Is it 0.0075 cents? No.
Oh, that got used there. That got used, didn't it?
Yeah.
Three people answered that correctly there. Well done. But how fast were you? Oh, look, there we go again. It's changing at the top again. This is great to see.
Still all to play for.
All to play for. Yeah,
Mark.
It's like the Grand National. Yeah.
Where is Veeam 2023 being held this year? Is it Miami? Is it Vegas? Is it New Orleans? Or is it Chicago?
There we go. Miami, absolutely.
Yeah. Vegas was last year.
Oh, and another change at the top.
Oh,
and the last question. Let's
last
see.
question.
Still to play for. Number 10. How many user groups are there listed on the community hub? Is it 30, 28, 25, or 33? I think this is honestly just a bit of luck, this question.
This is you're going to take your luck. Nobody got it right. Nobody got it right.
Wow.
Okay. I have never seen that before in one of these Kahoot questions. Never seen that before. There's 28. There are 28.
Are we ready to see who won this Kahoot?
Yep. Feel like it should be a drum roll.
Do it.
And the win. So in third place, Mikey Lark. Second place, Champion Stalk. Champion. And number 1, Quick Octopus.
So we've got 1.
Well done.
He was quick, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It's Mark.
Clue was in the name, eh?
And 3 was excellent. Right, chaps. Whoever. And so I need the top three players there. You know who you are. We've got their names. Can you? How's the best way to do this then, Maddie? Do we?
Yeah, I'm going to just leave my email address in the chat. So please, the winners, just write me an email and I'll send out the vouchers to you. So I think that's the best way to do it.
Cool. Good to know. Yeah, well played, everyone. Well played. Fastest fingers. So yeah, it pays to be a winner. You've got to be correct and you've got to be fast. That's the way this works. But yeah, good. Glad you enjoyed that. We'll probably keep that for future events as well. So we're coming to the last 10 minutes. And I guess I'm going to show my screen. I guess it was asked in one of the questions before, you know, when's the next user group and stuff like that. So just to, how do we start this? We have been away for a while. You know, we had the pandemic in between, a couple of years. We had a couple of sessions. The last in-person event we had was at the Shard in London. So really, we want to take the feedback from you. We want the guidance from you. You know, what do you want us to look like? You know, we had the last event in London. It was the last in-person event at the Shard, as I say, in London. So how do you want us to look? You know, from virtual events, do you want to keep virtual events, or do you want to make them more virtual events more frequently? You know, do we want to make them biannually or every quarter, or do we want to do turnabout, have a virtual event, an in-person event? We will let you, you know, guide us and guide us on how you want it to do it. Just bear in mind that an in-person event does take longer to organise and bring together, and then we would have to bring in sponsors, whereas virtual events we can do on a more frequent basis because they're really quick to get set up and everybody can join just as and when, and getting people to in-person events could be a bit tricky. You know, so do we keep the in-person event, do we keep it in, let's say, London, it's nice and central for everyone, or do we look at maybe, you know, spreading it around the country? You know, we started off in Scotland, we've done the Midlands, we did Manchester. Do we then take it further afield? Do we go to someplace like Ireland? You know, I know Craig Rogers would probably like that in Ireland. Do we even take it into Wales? And I'm going to throw something out there a bit more contentious. Do we maybe need to start looking at more regional user groups? You know, do we need to look at a Scottish user group, a north of England user group, an Irish user group, a Welsh user group, that kind of thing? So absolutely anything that any feedback that you can give about it and any guidance what you like to think about that would be gratefully received. You know, it helps us shape what we're going to do. It helps us drive forward the user group. And then obviously on the back of that, what would you like to see at these events? What content would you like to see? The virtual events are easy enough. We can do demonstrations, we can do talks, we can do slides. But in person, what do you want to see? Do you want to see more things about, you know, lab stuff, demo stuff in the labs, you know, hands-on kind of thing? Or do you want to see presentations about how people have maybe overcome, let's say, maybe, I think the last time we did one of these, we actually had one of the attendees was in the middle of dealing with a ransomware attack. So we basically opened up the floor to them and let them talk about how they were dealing with it. So, you know, I'm seeing in the comments, you know, more deep dives like this for sure, backup deep dives and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, we'll let you dictate that. You know, we're just here to facilitate and make sure that everybody comes in and leaves the sessions well informed and feel like it was a good investment of their time. Appreciate everybody's time is a bit valuable these days. So yeah, over to you. So it's a Q&A session left to go. Really, is there anything else you'd like to ask? Anything you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to do? I would say let's keep the conversation going. You know, get over to the community hubs, get the questions, ask the questions. You know, whether it's you're stuck on an issue you have with a Veeam job or anything, or if it's a question about a Veeam feature, or just in general a chat about, you know, what they liked, what you didn't like about the user groups and what you like to see in the future. You know, it's very much the emphasis on user. It's you shape it. It's your user group. How do you want it run? What do you want to talk about? So yeah, I'd hand it over to you guys and just, you know, let us know. Just going through the session, deep dives, R&D, community-driven enhancements. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking community, then we can talk about the fact that, you know, Veeam operate fantastic community events. You know, they've got the overarching Veeam 100, what they call Veeam 100, which is then split into 3 subgroups. We have the Veeam Vanguard, which myself, Ian, and Michael are all members of the Veeam Vanguard, and then there's also the Veeam Legends program, which is all based around the community interaction on the community hubs. And then the last one is an internal part to the Veeam 100, which is the Veeam MVP, which is internal staff and that. And it truly is one of the best community programs I think I've been involved with, being in, you know, vExpert and things like that. So get yourself into the community hubs, get in the discussion, and ask questions away. You know, help shape the future of this user group. And anything else from your side of things, Ian? Anything you want to add?
I just wanted to touch on Robert's point about talking to R&D and discussing those kind of things. Like the OG Veeam forums, I think, still a good place to get that kind of content out there. Like if you've got an issue or some feedback or what you think might be a product enhancement, get that in the product forums. And as I saw earlier on in the chat, don't just +1 the feature request. Like, yeah, sometimes like give your own reasoning for that. Like we know firsthand that the product managers do pay a close attention to that. Like that's part of their feedback and input into their product development life cycle.
Yeah, and all the way up to GOSDev. I mean, even GOSDev is active on those forums. You know, so don't think it's just an empty void that you put your opinion into. As Ian says, the product managers are actively within the R&D forums, and even some of them are actually on the community forums as well, the community.veeam.com hub. So, you know, get out there and get spreading the word and get involved. I think we've actually managed to wrap up 5 minutes early. We can talk Q&A, or you can have another chat for 5 minutes. If you want, Madalena, is there anything you'd like to add? Michael?
No, thank you very much, guys. It was really great session. And as you said, like everyone is welcome to come and ask questions in the community hub, in the VUG. Just share with other people as well if you know people that are interested to join a great community. Let them know about the VUG UK. Craig and Ian there are going to take good care of you. Yeah, just one more thing that I wanted to mention is that, as I said at the beginning, this video the recording is going to be available at the YouTube channel, but once we have it there, we are going to also post it at the VUG UK at the community hub. So maybe we can even share the slides if anyone is interested. Michael, Ian, Craig, I don't know.
Yep.
If you're okay with sharing the slides in the VUG UK, that would be great. So Deep says he's interested in having it, so I'll leave that with you.
I mean, just on my part there, sorry, Craig, I'm going to be posting a topic on the community hub as well, just to keep the conversation going, you know, find out if there's anything else people want to learn about shore backup, etc. So yeah, I want to be able to link to the recording and share the slides.
Cool. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah. So hopefully today's been an informative, fun, and educational experience. We'll look forward to the next event, whether that's an in-person event later in the year or if we have another virtual event. We'll see again. We'll let you guide us on the appetite for which one we want to do, and see you in the forums and see you in the next call. Have a good day, everyone.
Sorry, Craig. Just on that, maybe we could get a poll on the community forum for the next location.
Oh, actually, so we did do a previous poll a couple of weeks ago about where the next one would be. But if you want to come back and revisit that and make suggestions, then please jump on and give your feedback and give your ideas. Yeah, everything is absolutely welcome. Like I said, there's no silly questions or no silly suggestions. There's some that will take a lot longer to consider than others. Some will just dismiss out hand, but yeah, everything's welcome. All your opinions are welcome.